Any gambler knows that sooner or later you get it wrong. He should have brought gumboots. No, correct that. He should have picked the place for their meeting himself. Lucas looked about him with increasing misgiving. The Muck will be out of sight of the road, he'd been promised. He wasn't at all sure about that. Abandoned barns and outbuildings lined two sides of the yard, sinking into ruin beneath the leaden sky. On the third side stood the former farmhouse, windows and door boarded up. The barricading was weathered to a pale grey. Years had passed, he decided, since the house had been a family home. Now only a pile of junk heaped in one corner of the yard suggested anyone ever came here. The heap attracted his attention, to the extent that he spent a couple of minutes studying it. It appeared a curious mix of old washing machines, cookers, and sundry metal items. All was rusting gently away, and he wondered where on earth it had come from. Perhaps some fly-tipper had surreptitiously dumped a load of scrap before speeding off. Yet there was money in scrap, metal scrap, thought Lucas, pursing his lips. Not enough in this instance to be worth his bothering about, however. There was a sizable gap where the yard met the road. A pair of corroded posts leaned at drunken angles to the ground, but the heavy 5-barred gate that had once hung between them had disappeared. Probably, thought Lucas, gone for scrap like the stuff over there. Yet the post still composed an entrance of sorts, and led the eye of any observer towards his cherished Mercedes in its undignified surroundings. Better get it under cover. But where? The obvious shelter was the open-fronted cowshed ahead of him, roofed with corrugated iron sheets. They were coming loose, creaking and quivering in the stiff breeze sweeping over the hilltop. He squelched over to it and peered in. Little could be made out. It was dark and still smelled faintly of its former occupants, or rather their bodily functions. He took a few cautious steps inside. No point in driving in and risking a tyre being ripped to pieces by some discarded piece of metal junk, such as he'd seen outside. His eyes were adjusting to the gloom. He could make out stalls, ancient scraps of straw moulded underfoot. Despite himself, Lucas became curious about the fate of this once busy place, reduced to such misery. What was more, disused farming land, if it were for sale and if he could get planning permission, would be worth acquiring at the right price. Now that was an idea worth serious consideration. Nowadays it'd be a project much more to his taste than a small heap of discarded scrap. Something big and profitable. You could get 6 cottage-style homes around this yard alone. 8 if you squeezed them up a bit. People, townies with a romantic yearning for country living, liked that sort of thing. They wouldn't think of buying a home that small in the city, but they'd shell out good money for a rabbit hutch with a reproduction inglenook fireplace and a view. He saw these desirable dwellings in his imagination. Cotswold stone, not the real thing, but a cheaper fake version. Pointed wooden hoods above the front doors and a residence parking area. Individual garages added to building costs and took up valuable space. Reluctantly, he thrust this vision of a shining investment from his mind. He hadn't come here to look for building land, but Lucas prided himself that he had an eye for an opportunity. Some of the best bits of business he'd ever done had begun like this. A chance encounter and a quick decision. See a gap and go for it. He walked deeper into the shed. Behind him, the silver-grey car was framed in the open square of light, and glancing back at it, it seemed to Lucas the Mercedes belonged to a different world from the one he now stood in. An out-there world, where things were unpleasant but normal. He'd entered an in-here world, where different rules applied, and he wasn't sure what they were. He had a brief, irrational sensation of not being able to return, cut off the moment he took an irrevocable step under the rattling roof, its gaps letting in daylight and rain. In here, it wasn't just a different place.